This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
The European Union on Friday agreed an 18th package of sanctions against Russia over its war in Ukraine, including measures aimed at dealing further blows to the Russian oil and energy industry. The EU will set a moving price cap on Russian crude at 15% below its average market price, EU diplomats said, aiming to improve on a largely ineffective $60 cap that the group of 7 major economies have tried to impose since December 2022. The EU just approved one of its strongest sanctions packages against Russia to date, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said on X.
China's exports of refined products, including diesel, gasoline, aviation fuel and marine fuel, fell 0.6% year-on-year to 5.34 million tons in June, according to the customs data, though the figure marked the highest monthly total since June 2024. Diesel exports dropped sharply in June, down 59.4% year-on-year to 330,000 tons, a steep drop from levels seen in May. For the first 6 months of the year, diesel exports were down 46.8%. Gasoline exports stood at 780,000 tons in June, down 16.7% year-on-year. During January and June, gasoline exports fell 21% to 3.89 million tons.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
US-based firms Baker Hughes, Hunt Energy and Argent LNG will develop a master plan for Syria's oil, gas and power sector, Argent LNG CEO Jonathan Bass said on Friday, in a partnership aimed at rebuilding energy infrastructure shattered by 14 years of civil war. The move marks a swift turnaround as US companies enter a country previously under one of the world's tightest sanctions regimes that US President Donald Trump lifted at the end of June. The companies plan to help explore and extract oil and gas and produce power to help get the economy running as the government seeks to put Syria back on the map. The plan comes after a dash by other companies, many from Gulf Arab states, to sign deals to bolster Syria's power generation and ports infrastructure.
Malaysia is boosting coal-fired power output and importing the fuel at record levels, a Reuters analysis of data showed, taking advantage of low prices even as it pledges to increase use of gas-fueled electricity generation in the longer term. The Southeast Asian nation is the 5th largest exporter of liquefied natural gas but has said it could start importing the superchilled fuel due to rising demand and dwindling gas reserves. It has progressively ramped up coal-fired power output to address surging demand driven by data centers. Coal-fired power output in peninsular Malaysia, which accounts for about 80% of power demand, rose nearly 9% in May and June. That was 3 times faster than power demand growth of 3%, data from Malaysia's grid system operator showed. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. China has quietly issued its first 2025 rare earth mining and smelting quotas without the typical public statement, sources with knowledge of the matter said this week. Another sign of Beijing tightening its control over the crucial sector. The quotas are closely monitored as a barometer for the global supply of rare earths, a group of 17 elements used in electric vehicles, wind turbines, robots and missiles. China is the world's largest producer of the minerals and the government typically issues them twice a year to state-owned companies, but they have been delayed this year. China is increasingly sensitive about rare earths and its control over the supply, which it has been willing to assert amid its trade discussions with the US and European Union.
Copper climbed to its strongest in more than a week on Friday, driven by Chinese buyers, hopes for a US-China trade deal, and higher risk appetite among other investors. 3-month copper on the London Metal Exchange gained 1.1% to $9,777 per metric ton by 1600 GMT, its highest since July 8. LME copper has eased from its 3-month peak of $10,200.50, hit on July 2, and Chinese participants are buying on dips, Morex senior base metals strategist Alistair Munro said.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Chicago Board of Trade soybean futures touched a two-week high on Friday on worries that heat may threaten U.S. crops and expectations that the country's biofuel policy would boost demand for soyoil, analysts said. Soyoil futures set contract highs for a second day, while corn and wheat futures also finished stronger. For the week, soybeans advanced about 2.8% and corn climbed 3.8%. The rallies were a turnaround after the markets were recently under pressure from projections for large U.S. harvests and plentiful supplies from South America.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.